Most people know Abraham Lincoln as the president who had that big ass hat and held the country together during the Civil War. Now, what we don't usually picture is him sitting at his desk while his kids climbed on him and acted like it was just another day in the living room instead of at the White House. And to really understand why he was like that, you have to start with how he grew up. Lincoln's father was Thomas Lincoln, and Thomas was a frontierman and a carpenter. His life was really about survival, and that was it. You worked, you built shit, and you fixed what broke, and if you didn't work, then you didn't eat. Now, school was not something that was important to him. Books didn't put any food on the table, and reading didn't help you build a cabin or cut firewood. And being emotionally close to your children just wasn't part of the culture that he came from. Later in life, Lincoln would say that his father never gave him an education, which sounds a little harsher than it really was, because what he meant by that was that no one encouraged him. Nobody had told him that reading mattered, and nobody helped him grow intellectually. He even went on to say that his father taught him how to work, but he did not teach him how to love it. As a kid, Lincoln would read constantly. He borrowed books from neighbors and read pretty much anything that he could get his hands on. And after a long days of physical work, he would sit by the fire and just study. He became educated almost in spite of how he was raised, not because of it. And as an adult, him and his father were never really close. They stayed in touch, but there was always that little bit of distance. That background is what led Lincoln to be the type of father he was. Lincoln did not want to be that kind of dad to his kids himself. When Lincoln had his kids, he was very different from most of the fathers of his time. He was openly affectionate, he was playful, and he embraced the noise and the chaos. There are stories of Lincoln laying on the floor wrestling with his boys. And people who visited the White House said it felt more like a crowded family home than a place of government. His sons, they would run into meetings without knocking. They would crawl under his desk and they would sit on his lap while he worked. And one visitor even complained about how undisciplined the kids seemed, and Lincoln just brushed it off and said that his children mattered more than his appearances. At one point, when someone asked him why he allowed so much interruption, Lincoln said, "Children are the hands by which we take hold of heaven." He also told his kids stories all the time, the same stories over and over. He wasn't distant when he was at home. He actually liked being with his kids. And that's where Lincoln really excelled as a father. He was emotionally close to his kids. But here's the other side of it. Lincoln was gone a lot. Before he was president, he traveled for legal work. Then politics took more of his time. Then he became president during the Civil War, when the country was literally falling apart. Even when he was home, people noticed how tired he was, and he slept very little. He carried that constant stress. And that showed up in what his kids didn't get. They got love, but not always the structure or the guidance. That gap becomes really clear when you look at what his surviving son later said about him. Lincoln had 4 sons, with only one of them living a full adult life. Robert Todd Lincoln. Robert was the oldest. He lived to adulthood, and he became a lawyer, served as a Secretary of War, and later became the ambassador to Great Britain. On paper, he looked great, but the way he talked about his father was a little complicated. Robert even went on to say, "No son ever had a kinder father than Abe Lincoln." Which sounds great, but he also admitted that he barely knew him, and later in life he said that his father didn't really prepare him for adult life. Historians usually sum up Robert's view like this: Lincoln was loving, but he wasn't very instructive. Robert felt sheltered growing up, and when he became an adult, he didn't feel ready. After Lincoln was assassinated, Robert was still very young and suddenly carrying the weight of his father's name. He loved his dad, but he still also felt that distance his entire life. Willie Lincoln. Willie was Lincoln's favorite, and it was obvious to everyone. He was smart, calm, thoughtful, and Lincoln said Willie was the child that was most like him. When Willie died at 11 years old during Lincoln's presidency, it destroyed him. People in the White House would write about how Lincoln was wandering the halls at night just crying. Lincoln even went on to say, "My poor boy, he was too good for this earth," and he never really got over that loss. Still, the war wouldn't stop, meetings wouldn't stop, and the decisions wouldn't stop either. Lincoln had to keep going. Tad Lincoln. Tad was the youngest. He had speech problems and learning difficulties, and today he'd probably be supported very differently than what it was back in the day. Lincoln adored his son Tad. Tad followed him everywhere. He interrupted meetings, he wandered the White House, and he even once drove a goat cart through the halls. When people would complain, Lincoln would just defend him. He even said this about Tad: "He is my constant companion." But that protectiveness also had a downside. Tad didn't get much structure, and he wasn't really prepared for adult life. After Lincoln was assassinated, Tad struggled badly and ended up dying at the age of 18. Now, what's consistent across all accounts is this: none of Lincoln's kids doubted that he loved them. They felt his affection, they trusted him, and they felt safe with him. But that same love doesn't always turn into preparation or guidance for real life. Robert felt that especially. He loved his father, but he never felt ready for the world. When you step back and you take a look at Lincoln's life, it's really hard to miss this part. The way he grew up is exactly what made him who he was. Growing up with a distant, practical father forced him to become independent. It pushed him towards books, it taught him how to work without being praised, and it made him tough, thoughtful, and self-reliant. Those things didn't come from comfort, they come from the kind of childhood that he had. And when Lincoln became a father, he went hard in the opposite direction. His childhood built the man who saved a country, but when he tried to give his kids something better than what he had, he left out some of the things that made him who he was. And I'm not here to tell anyone how to raise their kids. I just want to share these stories so other dads can take what works for them and use it with their own families.